Main Street Media, Utah. This is Talk with John. How are you doing today? Look forward to having you on and being on with me. I will be having some guests today, and I will be introducing them here shortly. And I just noticed that my screen needs to be resized and so forth. So I'll be introducing them momentarily. But first, let's get this show off to a proper start. This is KMMU.org, Main Street Media, Utah, and we are so grateful that you're here today. Please go to our channels. So go to mainstreetmediautah.com, I believe it is, or KMMU.org. And you can go to either one of those spots and it will take you to our main page. From there, there's three little buttons. There's one for X, there's one for YouTube, and there's one for Rumble. You can click on any one of those and see a number of our great shows. In fact, the group that I'm going to have on has been on some of our other hosts, some of our other fantastic hosts. So last night, Gowd with the Gowd crowd was on, and he had a number of the people that were running for the Republican Central Committee and different positions on the Central Committee. So please go to that. Also, you can go to that webpage and you will find a number of my previous shows. So should you find this show of interest, please feel free to do that. So without further ado, let me get to it. I also like to start the show off with a show prayer and show mantra to give you all kind of an idea of where I come from. So let's start with the show prayer. I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may be an acceptable token to our Father above. Then the show mantra: where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty, and the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. Folks, that's what I'm about, is liberty. To my non-religious friends, what is liberty? What do I see liberty as? I see it as the action side of freedom. It's the moral side of freedom. And it's the spiritual side of freedom. Just because you have the freedom to do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing. So let me put it this way. I'm not going to come down on anybody for drinking alcohol. But if you drink 2 bottles of Jack Daniels in an hour and a half, you're going to have some consequences. I promise you that. So just because, like I said, just because you're free to do a thing doesn't mean you should. All right, let me bring on my 2 guests. Today, we are going to be talking about Little Cottonwood Canyon. And I am shifting from one screen to another. So right now, I have 2 individuals from Friends of Little Cottonwood Canyon. We will be going into that, and you can, let me pull up the website, for heaven's sakes, John. Why did you take it down? So their webpage is LCC, not, I got business on my mind, folks. What can I say? It's lccfriends.org. So to learn more about them, go to Friends of Little Cottonwood Canyon at lccfriends.org. And as you can see, I've got 2 individuals joining me right now, Emily and Mike. Emily and Mike, thank you so much for joining me here on Talk with John. Looking forward to having you on. So let me see. What is going on now? For heaven's sakes, I can't understand why anybody would have a problem with having a gun. So what is this whole situation? You know, there are some really powerful, important people in the state of Utah that think that we need to have gondolas go up Little Cottonwood Canyon. Who would have a problem with that? I mean, if I was a realtor, or if I owned some real estate up that canyon, I'd be all for that. I mean, I can't think of something that would be better, right? It'd bring me lots of money. And on top of that, it helps tourism. Who doesn't love a gondola? Who hasn't been up on the gondola or the tram, whatever you want to call, up Big Cottonwood Canyon or Little Cotton, gone up one of those? I mean, it's a really cool thing, right? And then, you know, maybe it takes us back to our feelings of maybe we're like in the Swiss Alps. I don't know. Who in the world could be against the idea of a gondola?
Well, how about the taxpayers of the state? That many of the taxpayers in the state would be having to pay this to the tune of $1,200 per household across the state. People in St. George, people up at Bear Lake would be paying for something that they've never seen, never would use, and would never benefit from.
Boy, $1,200. Well, since as I don't have real estate, I may not want to do that. I definitely don't want to have $1,200 of my money going to help someone else's real estate acquisition.
And the other issue is that supposedly it's designed to solve a problem. We suggest that it won't solve the problem. All it does is moves traffic downhill.
Well, okay, so let me read just a little bit right at the very beginning of right kind of like the header. I believe it's above the fold is what people would call. So I'm just going right to your website. In 2021, despite 89% of Utahns speaking out against it, the Utah Department of Transportation, UDOT, decided to construct the world's longest 8-mile gondola in Little Cottonwood Canyon at a cost of $1.4 billion to Utah taxpayers. Okay, here's another question I have. How much traffic, how many people can you move on a gondola? How many, I don't see how you get rid of cars. We're still going to have cars that get up there, aren't we?
Yeah, well, UDOT designed their gondola to hold approximately 1,000 people per hour, or transport 1,000 people per hour. And so 70% of the traffic as UDOT designed it would still be on the road. So it hardly solves the traffic issue at all.
70% of the traffic would still be on the road.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So let's go. I've given some of the positions that I think the supporters, the real estate people would say, and maybe some of the transportation people would say, well, we're getting rid of 30%. What are some of the other reasons why they say we need this, if I might ask you?
Well, they're trying to address closures. They're saying it increases mobility because when the roads close, we don't have access to canyon. The canyon you'd be able to access the canyon via the gondola, and that actually is not a fully accurate statement because we have had situations where the road might be open, but the resorts are closed. And if the resorts are closed because of avalanche, something called interlodge kicks in. And interlodge is that situation where there's the risk of avalanches in the resort areas, and therefore everybody has to be inside. And when that situation exists, UDOT has stated that the gondola will not run. So even a couple of years ago, when we had major closing of the highway, and the road highway was down for almost as many as 10 days, the gondola would not have run 80% of the time because interlodge was in place, and therefore nothing's going to move in the canyon just due to safety reasons. And so we can start with that. The other point is think about the cost benefit analysis here. We're suggesting that we need this. UDOT says on average we have 11 closures per year. How many did we have last year? 1. How many did we have this year? About that many. And so the point being is, on a day like today, blue sky, the road is clear, traffic is moving very well on the road. Are people going to take the gondola? No. But Emily can probably tell us how much it's costing just to have that thing sitting idle without anybody on it. And by the way, it wouldn't be sitting idle; it's going to be running full tilt, even though the cabins are empty. It's not a viable usage. They're not even a good usage of our tax dollars.
Emily, so tell us a little bit about some of the. Okay, so let me pause here before we go to Emily. Mike, do a quick introduction of yourself and why you're for helping friends of Little Cottonwood Canyon. And Emily, would you please introduce yourself and say give the same background? So, Mike, we'll start with you on that.
Yes. Background, I'm a former Procter & Gamble executive, production manager, operations manager, degreed in organizational behavior, and looking for ways in which how you can improve organizations by improving process and people. Got involved with Friends of Little Cottonwood Canyon, again, some 4+ years ago, because we saw what we felt was wasteful spending on the part of UDOT, looking for massive solutions to a problem that is not all that great. And we saw in many cases the solution actually being touted, but when in reality we saw that really what at the base of it is you suggested that this might be special interest looking for a way to make a buck and using tax dollars to pay the way that we did. And so we got involved and formed Friends of Little Cottonwood Canyon, which is really a grassroots effort of many of us that apply business conservative type solutions to problems, and based on the premise that let's keep the role of government separate from the role of the private sector. Business problems should be solved by businesses, and we've always been looking for common sense solutions as opposed to massive influxes of tax dollars to solve these problems.
Emily, what brought you into this?
What brought me into this? I just love Little Cottonwood, and I love to ski and rock climb and trail run. And when I first heard about the gondola, it greatly upset me, and I knew that I had to do something about that. So I met Mike at a friend's house, and he started Friends of Little Cottonwood with some other founders, and that's kind of how I got involved.
So what is your role, Emily?
I'm currently on the board of Friends of Little Cottonwood, and that's my role within the organization.
Okay, so share with us some of the numbers that you have seen about this process and why you think it is possibly a bad idea.
Some of the numbers, as in the cost of the gondola?
Correct.
Yeah, so a little bit of background. UDOT has been doing this really long process to study the impacts of the gondola since 2018. So, inflation has happened and they've published different numbers. They've published $500 million. It's gone up, it's gone down. But kind of like what we think is a pretty accurate number is one published by an entity called the Wasatch Front Regional Council. And they're responsible for transportation projects within, obviously, the Wasatch Front. And they've estimated that UDOT's gondola project would cost $1.4 billion. And I believe that was 2 years ago when they published this. So obviously, inflation has continued going up, and we don't really know what the gondola would end up costing, but 1.4 billion is the number that seems to be pretty accurate.
To move 1,000 people an hour.
Yes, that is
24,000 people a day.
Well,
not even going to do the rest.
So with UDOT's plan, they plan to construct a parking garage at the base of Little Cottonwood Canyon that would hold 2,500 cars. So however many people can fit into those cars to get on the gondola would be the number of people. So you couldn't realistically have like max capacity of 1,000 people over the course of 24 hours. UDOT wouldn't plan on operating the gondola for 24 hours, obviously, and where would those 24,000 people go and come from? But about 2,500 cars are planned to be able to be parked at the base of Little Cottonwood.
John, stop for a second and think about that. The numbers Emily's given you. So you talk about 1,050 or so, 1,050 folks per hour of transporting them. Remember that the loading of the canyon doesn't take place evenly. It takes place in peak hours in the morning, right. A couple hours. So basically you're going to see all your load between 7, 8 o'clock till 9:15, 9:30 in the morning. And then somewhere around a little bit before 4 up to, beyond 5, everyone's going to try to get out of the canyon. The gondola is not going to be able to handle those numbers.
Yeah. Something's not quite
The
working.
math doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Snowbird on a busy day has about 7,500 people on the slopes, maybe more. Alta likes to see around 7,000 as their tops. If you add in a grand here and or so in terms of employees for the resorts, you're looking at 16,000 folks, basically needing to get up the canyon. The gondola won't do it. It won't do it given the demands that people need to get to the resort. That's why, as Emily said, you're still going to have vehicle traffic. The challenge, of course, is how do we get more people? How do we increase the density? Get people out of cars and get them on to transit buses and the like. So we've got to get better at that. The gondola is not the answer.
So what do you guys propose the answer is?
I believe if we invested in the bus system, something like what we currently have, like I am a bus rider, like a ski resort bus rider, and I just see how busy it is and how popular it is. And I think that if we expanded parking at the bus stops and if we had more frequent and reliable buses, then more people would take the bus system.
So when you say more frequent and more reliable, what's the issue with reliability? And something tells me, you're going to have reliability issues with those gondolas. Mike's already shared with me that that when there's a lockdown situation, basically at those at the ski resorts, they're not going to be running those gondolas anyway. So buses wouldn't be able to help or hurt, right?
Yeah, so when I was referring to reliable, I was thinking about reliability of scheduling. So obviously, if there's traffic and it takes an hour to drive up the canyon, the buses are going to be stuck in that traffic. So along with increasing the number and frequency of buses, like we need to incentivize people to get out of their cars and take the buses, or the buses are obviously just going to be stuck in the same traffic that we're talking about right now.
Okay. What are you guys with Friends of Cottonwood Canyon making some counter proposals on what can be done? And also let's probably even look at the time frame of when this was first proposed. Who do you think's behind it besides UTA? Because my guess is there's some other people behind this. Who's the supporters of it? We just had a legislative session happen. I didn't hear that this is a done deal in that legislative session. Now, heaven knows, I've missed more than a few bills that were done. And then what we're looking at going forward over the next couple of years. When are they supposed to do a groundbreaking? When is there hope to do a groundbreaking?
Well, the lawsuits have really slowed things down. UDOT says that they can't do anything as long as the lawsuits are in place. That's not quite accurate, because the plaintiffs of the three different lawsuits are willing to stipulate that that they want UDOT to start the process. UDOT is saying we can't do anything because of the lawsuits. The plaintiffs in lawsuits are saying, no, you could do what we call the phase one activities and enhance busing. Right now, the buses are running at greatly reduced numbers from previous years.
Why is that?
One, UTA says they can't find drivers. And they've been saying that now for 3 years. Now, I'm a business guy. I used to be in human resources, and I knew that my role was to hire people to support the operation. And if I was to say to my CEO, I can't hire people this year to support the routes, I don't think I would have a job. Now, we're going on our third year, and they're still hiding behind, we can't find drivers. So right now, the bus service is a combination of UDOT providing some limited service and some contract bus service that's trying to fill the gap. We're still running at 30-minute intervals on the routes. Oh, and wow. At 30-minute intervals, Emily spoke about reliability. And reliability for me is that you can count on a bus showing up and there's space for you on that bus. And there's not. These buses are on busy days are leaving riders standing on the roadside at the pickup locations. And, call me silly, but I just can't imagine too many riders are going to be willing to have that happen and then hope that the bus is going to come by for them on a subsequent day. They're going to get in their car. So to Emily's point, we need reliable buses running at increased frequency. And initially, some of UDOT's UTA's initial plans were to run the buses what's called an enhanced busing option at 10 and 15-minute intervals. And that would do what Emily is suggesting, is getting more buses and greater opportunities for butts to be in those seats and getting out of cars and driving up. That would go a great far way to getting people up the canyon without having to rely on cars. But until we solve that and get better busing, we're going to constantly have this problem. Other things we're thinking about, and UDOT frankly is considered, is tolling. In getting people right now, 50% of the people that drive up the canyon are single occupancy vehicles, 50%. And that's an empirical data based on many of us standing alongside the road and watching the cars going up. 50%, about one occupant per vehicle, 40% two, and the rest mixed going on up. If we could get all the cars going up at 3 occupants, we would reduce the number of vehicles significantly. And that is something that has happened in Big Cottonwood Canyon. They have put in place reserved parking at the 2 ski resorts. And the 2 ski resorts have reduced congestion in the morning drive significantly just by doing that. Now, if you don't have a reservation going up the canyon to go to either Brighton and Solitude, you don't get on the highway. We still have one of the ski resorts in Little Cottonwood Canyon that refuses to implement reserve parking, and that would help significantly. So remember, I said that I'm a business person, and I think business problems should be handled by businesses. And until the businesses are carrying their share on this, we will continue to have a problem in the canyon.
So speaking of the businesses, who benefits? What businesses do? Because there's a number of businesses that are up and down that canyon, restaurants that are not part of the actual resorts, but still take care of and offer, things to those that are going up and down the canyon. What are your thoughts there?
Well, you might be speaking about Big Cottonwood Canyon, because there in Little Cottonwood Canyon, there are businesses at both of the endpoints, at both the ski resorts. So in answer to your question, who benefits? Well, the 2 private ski areas benefit. Profitable private ski businesses. A small percentage of Utah population might benefit on the days that they might choose to ride the gondola. And certainly the business owner that owns the Lakai restaurant and the property surrounds that, who wants to develop that further with restaurants and a boutique hotel, that individual would benefit. And of course, we have 2 former politicians turned developers that have been promoting this as well. They would benefit, obviously.
Who are the 2 politicians, former politicians?
A former Sandy City Councilman McCandless, and former Senate President Wayne Niederhauser are developers and make up an organization called CW Management.
Okay. What would you like my audience to know about this? What would you like? Actually, let's pause there. We just got through a legislative session. I heard about this last legislative session. I'm hearing, I know that it happened this year. Was any new, did you have anything advanced this year in this legislative session for or against the gondola system?
There were a couple bills, I think, that didn't make it. They were, I think Senator Cullimore attempted to try to put a little bit more money into the Cottonwood Canyon's Transportation Infrastructure Fund, and I don't think that went through. Money was tight this year, even though that we had a $30 billion budget. That's a 130% increase over 2015. I really want someone to explain to me how we need to, that level of expenditure, given our population only went up 6.6%. I'm still struggling with that. So we didn't see anything directly supporting it. I think that our legislators are starting to get a little more conservative in watching their money, not as much as I think we'd be comfortable with. We certainly appreciate the work that Phil Lyman and Trent Staggs have done in terms of driving home amongst those conservative Republicans that still remain on this issue, that this is wasteful spending. And it's the wrong use of government dollars. It's just bottom line, it's a mistake. And I think they've been very courageous in carrying that message to members of the legislature as well as members of the Republican Party.
Emily, your thoughts?
Well, as far as legislation, a small victory, I would say, is the passing of SB 195. Just a little bit more background about UDOT's gondola proposal. They basically said they were going to start with a phased approach. So phase one, they would improve the bus system. Phase two, they would do some other enhancements. And then phase three would be the gondola. And people have been concerned that they would go out of order in the phases. And so SB 195 suggests that UDOT has to go in order. So that was a small victory that we had this session.
Yeah, thanks. That was John. There was a one line, an amendment to that bill. Got that piece in there. So yeah, Emily's right. That's a small victory of protecting the process.
Well, at least we got that small victory in. So what would you like my listeners, what action would you like them to take?
I think every legislator needs to understand that this is the old "I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore" speech kind of a thing. Is that this is a classic example of wasteful spending. And if Republicans want to claim to be the party of fiscal conservatism, they need to start acting the part and standing up against wasteful spending. And this is the poster child of wasteful spending. And it's get on the phone, email, text, let them know that we expect better from our legislators.
Emily, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I think sometimes the legislature passes things and it goes without people's notice, but people have been very observant and involved in this. And I think the gondola is a unique issue because it's not really a matter of like there's not a lot of gray area here. Like the gondola isn't designed to work as a transportation solution. Like there aren't really positives that people can argue for the gondola, and it kind of comes down to like the right thing for the legislature to do is not to fund the gondola because it's not the right decision for Utah and the people of Utah and the taxpayers. And so kind of just to echo what Mike was saying, like make it known to your legislators that you know about this and where you stand on it, and that it's not going to go unseen if it does get funded.
Okay, so 1.5 billion. I'm assuming this project will take several years to build if it was to be fully funded, correct? And yes. 1.5 billion, if I remember correctly, Mike, you said was a couple of years ago. So let's say that they actually started, doing shoveling right now, right? We're probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of a 2 to 3 year project would be my guess.
Longer than that. And Emily, help me. I think when they broke it up into phased activities, there was almost like 2 years for phase somewhere. And I know that phase 3 was supposedly going to take. That was building the gondola itself as well as the parking garage was slated for about 2 years. Do I remember that right, Em?
Yeah, it would definitely take several years to build, especially with their phasing.
So if we're looking to start the building the gondola system in somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 4 years, and it's going to be done in 6 years, a $1.5 billion project 2 years ago is probably a $2 billion project by the time it's done.
That's a fair assumption. Even if you're just counting for inflation, I always want people to take a look about UDOT's track record to be able to hit their number. It's the old, when's the last time that we saw a project come in on time, at budget with all the features as promised? Look at what happened on the Davis County interstate expansion. They came back and said, "Oops, we made a mistake. It's going to cost double the amount." So that happens too frequently with UDOT projects, and I don't see how this would be any different.
Okay. So let me ask you this: are both of you saying, "I don't want this built"? Period. End of story. For no way, no how, or is it, say, you were Alta and Alta came up and said, "Hey, we're willing to pay for this." Would you be willing to do that?
If this was such a great idea, we'd be having the financial folks, the hedge fund people, they'd be pounding on the door wanting a piece of this. It doesn't come out for private financing.
Right.
It doesn't pencil out. And if it was that good, these ski resorts would already be coming. We'd always be wanting to do it, And the other part is, if it was such a great idea of having a gondola going up Little Cottonwood Canyon, maybe we should have one for every ski resort, all 15 ski resorts in the state. It just doesn't make any sense to do this. And there's other issues as well. I mean, our bias has always been, from a business standpoint and a fiscal responsibility standpoint. There are many people that say there's something unique and special about Little Cottonwood Canyon, and it's crazy to even think about putting up 22 towers and 2 angle stations up an 8-mile canyon, which means every mile you'd see 3 massive structures in there. And this canyon is enjoyed by more people than just skiers. People go up there for the viewscape. They go up for hiking. I'm obviously, let's take a look at what I'm sure there's people that could say, well, let's take Central Park and monetize that, tear everything down and build hotels and the like. It doesn't make any sense. There are many people that are coming to the Wasatch Front for the very things that Little Cottonwood Canyon, Big Cottonwood Canyon, and Mill Creek Canyon offer visitors. They don't want to see that developed. Now, one of the lawsuits, there's 3 of them, states that, and this is the water folks, the people that are constitutionally have the right to protect the water sources in Big and Little Cottonwood Canyon. And they're stating in their lawsuits that all the water is accounted for. And we know that anytime there's development in an area, it puts more pressure on increased development. And with more pressure on increased development comes more demands for water. That water is spoken for. And so many of the things that we're thinking about, it just doesn't make sense for so many different reasons. These canyons cannot handle the growth that would come from the development that would be facilitated by these entities. Now, one of the things I don't think a lot of people realize, I mean, UDOT is saying, we're going to build this wonderful gondola because it's going to solve a congestion problem. But hidden in the EIS is the argument that they make is they want to be able to put 2,300 more people per day into the canyon. And they're saying that they want to do that without any study to determine whether or not Little Cottonwood Canyon could even handle that. What's the impact of that level of visitation in this canyon? UDOT can't answer that question because they didn't study it in the EIS.
And the EIS is?
An environmental impact statement that is required by the NEPA process.
Okay. The other thought that comes to my mind, if they can make this happen, then they're going to be, what is Park City going to say? What is Big Cottonwood Canyon going to say? Other ski resorts are going to be like, hey, we want a system too.
That's right.
So
we want a gondola in every pot. Yes, indeed.
Yes. So we're going to be spending billions of dollars. Now I can think of a lot of other projects that I'd rather have money spent on. Like, for instance, I'm aware of Live on Utah right now. Live on Utah is having a hard time getting any money. It's to prevent, it's quote unquote, it's suicide prevention. And what they're trying to do is I love the name of it because it talks about what they really want to do is live on, get people to continue to live. Hey, find a reason. We want you to become aware for those people that are getting that bad of a place. We want to do everything we can to help support you in staying here because life and the world is a lot better with you in it than with you out of it. And so if they're having a hard time getting $1 million. I'm sorry, $1.5 billion just for a few people. I'm sorry for, yes, Emily, I know you love skiing, and if you could go in a gondola, maybe to make life easier. But the bottom line is for the skiers, sorry, you've been going up that canyon forever. We just need to find a way to continue to keep that happening. So, any last thoughts?
Oh, we probably could talk about this for hours, but I think we perhaps have captured the key thoughts for you, John.
Are there any businesses that are not for this? Let me ask you that. Do you know any business people that are not for doing this right now?
Well, we had some 40 to 50 successful business people sign a letter, send it to the governor and all the legislatures saying that they were opposed to it. And obviously there's many businesses that are environmentalist leaning, but again, we have a business perspective. We just think it's the wrong choice. Sometimes it's a difficult, it's a challenge for some businesses to come out and this sort of thing, because we have a tendency in the state to label. And so folks will stand up as individuals, but they're careful not to offend when they represent their businesses. This has real political overtones.
Yes, it does. Well, Emily and Mike, I want to say thank you so much for joining me. Please give my regards to Jesse. Tell him thank you for setting this up as well. We appreciate his assistance in making this happen. Thank you so much for your time today. We're going live right now on X, Rumble, and YouTube. So let me check something real quickly to see if we have any other. Nope. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. Good luck in getting this taken care of. Frankly, as a someone who doesn't like the government spending money on things that they definitely shouldn't be spending on money, I would say this is one of them. So Emily, thank you for being here today. Mike, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Have a wonderful evening. Take care. Thank you. All right, folks. We want to say a big thank you to Emily and Mike for joining us today. I'm grateful to have them on. I'm grateful for them bringing on that topic. What we will have this posted on our streaming platforms. So both on Rumble, like I said, Rumble, YouTube, and X, Twitter. I must admit, am somewhat stuck on Twitter. I call it a tweet. What can I say? So looking forward to that. And once again, thank you to Emily and Mike for joining us. We really appreciate them being here and bringing this to the attention of the audience. All right, let's go to some stories that are in the news. Want to bring up, I don't know if you guys have heard the debate, maybe not debate, but the on the national level, we've got Trump, a little infighting between Trump and Thomas Massey. We'll go to and probably hit that. I just want to see if there's any breaking news that has come out. Let's hit the real reason why the teachers union doesn't want to have the Department of Education closed down. It's because they would get a lot less money and have a lot less power. All right, so let me go ahead and, you know what? I'm not exactly sure if I could get that to play. So I am going to pause for a minute. I want to get a couple things done on my end. before we hit this. Well, let me real quickly just talk about Teachers Union Chief Randy Weingarten made a recent media appearance during which she admitted the real reason she doesn't want Trump administration to shut down the Department of Education. It's all about school choice. She doesn't want parents and kids to have it. Why would she oppose school choice? Simple. It threatens the teachers union. If your child's teacher is awful or their school is failing, Weingarten doesn't want parents to have the option of pulling their child out of school. What if everyone decides to do that and the school has to close? Well, the teachers wind up losing their power. So, folks, like I said, we're going to pause for just a moment, and I'm going to get a couple things arranged so I can have a couple things play. So, just a moment, and we're going to pause. There we go. Pausing on my end. I'll share what I'm doing. I'm just putting up my mic system to get that up and running. So hopefully I can play a few things for us. Unfortunately, as sometimes often happens, but way too unfortunately today especially, I was burning the candle at too many ends in the middle, trying to get some business done right before the beginning of the show. And so I didn't get my mic system set up. And in fact, it's coming down right now. It's just fell down on me. So I'll be putting that up here momentarily. That's my issue, I realize, and I apologize to the audience that we've got to take a brief delay for me to get that up. But I'll have my mic up and running. That way I can play a couple things over that I have a couple videos. Hopefully we can get those to play. And then a little bit later at around 5 o'clock, Joel Skousen should be joining us. And we're going to look forward to having him on. But okay, so we are back at it. We are back. Unfortunately, you had to see me getting a drink. But let's play. And one of these days, I'm going to learn how to play this on my own. If I had my helpful producer joining me, we'd do it. So I love the way the White House is handling these leftist organizations. So White House Secretary Caroline Leavitt shuts down disrespectful AP reporter on insulting tariff questions. She goes, I now regret giving a question to the Associated Press. The Gateway Pundit reported the following ruling. So, well, let's just do this. Let's play the back and forth with it's buffering.
I spent 20 years
and
studying
I get to have a commercial.
One discovery turned decades
Wonderful.
of research upside down.
There we go. Skip ad.
The receding gums and decaying teeth ruining your
I
life.
guess they're going to have 2 ads going, so we can't play it.
President Trump's last address to the VRT on the campaign trail, his big push was on tax cuts. He's going there today as he's proposing tax hikes in the form of tariffs. And I'm curious
he's not doing
why
that.
he's prioritizing that over the tax cuts.
He's is actually not implementing tax hikes. Tariffs are a tax hike on foreign countries that, again, have been ripping us off. Tariffs are a tax cut for the American people, and the president is a staunch advocate of tax cuts. As you know, he campaigned on no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security benefits. He is committed to all three of those things, and he expects Congress to pass them later this year.
I'm sorry, have you ever paid a tariff? Because I have.
That's
They
it.
don't get charged on foreign companies, they get charged on the importers.
And ultimately, when we have
So the question, this last question was, I'm sorry, have you ever paid a tariff? Because I have. They don't get charged on foreign companies, they get charged on the importers.
and balanced trade, which the American people have not seen in decades. As I said at the beginning, revenues will stay here, wages will go up, and our country will be made wealthy again. And I think it's insulting that you are trying to test my knowledge of economics and the decisions that this president has made. I'm now regret giving a question to the Associated Press. Mary, go ahead.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what you guys think about her in comparison to Jean-Pierre. I like seeing that, in the past, the Republicans have always played so nice with the media, way nicer than they should have. And what I think, another thing that I think needs to happen, and I've brought this up before. I brought this up on the last show. I'm going to bring it up again. Why is the media so against tax cuts? Why are they so against the U.S. aid losing money? Well, besides just their friends and their buddies not having money and losing some of that income, another reason why that they're against it is because they have their access is cut off. So that's another reason why they have a tendency to be against these tax cuts, because if you have more people in government, you have more people that can feed you stories, and with that, you have a greater income. You have more money coming into the system. Not only that, let's not forget that the government has been giving money to the Project Mockingbird, gave money to a number of news organizations. So, and then on top of that, AP just hates what's going on. Why do they hate it? Because they're losing a lot of their access. AP used to be a top performer. In fact, I think they should just lose their chair altogether and have that given to someone like Gateway Pundit, InfoWars, The Blaze. Let's see, trying to think of other news organizations. The Daily Wire. Any one of those news organizations have as many viewers, if not more, than the AP does. Now, yes, the AP puts out an article, and then you have your KUTVs and whatnot that run that article and just read it verbatim and give it as if it was their own. Bottom line, the money needs to go away. The milk cow needs to be put down, as it were. All right. Well, let's get to another article real quickly. And I believe we may have just had our next guest join us. So I will hurry and mention this real quickly. Representative Tom Massey responds after President Trump vows to lead primary challenge against him for opposing Trump-backed funding bill. Libertarian-leaning Rep. Thomas Massey is remaining defiant, even in the face of a potentially serious primary challenger supported by President Trump. As the Gateway Pundit reported earlier, Trump has declared political war on Massey for opposing the Trump-backed funding bill aimed at preventing a government shutdown. The president has urged Republican lawmakers to rally behind a continuing resolution to keep the government funded through September. But Massey is a hard no. He has slammed the bill as a uniparty deal that fully funds U.S. aid while providing zero funds for the border wall. So one thing I will give Thomas Massey, he is a man in the same vein, I would say, as Ron Paul. So Thomas Massey, hang in there. I don't think you're going to lose your seat, but we appreciate you being there. Speaking of appreciate him being there, I'm going to get to our next guest, Joel Skousen, in just a moment. But since we're really close to the top of the hour, I'm going to give out I want to mention real quickly, folks, you are listening to and viewing this here on KMMU Main Street, KMMU.org and MainStreetMedia.com, MainStreetMedia.org. You can find the shows, my shows with my past few shows with Joel Skousen. You can pick those up and obviously rewatch those again. Also, we are broadcasting live on Twitter/X or X/Twitter, whatever you want to say. Also on YouTube and Rumble are two other places that you can see us. So I'm going to give out the top of the hour show prayer and show mantra. So when it comes to doing this show, folks, this is the prayer of my heart. I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. You know, there's a lot of things that I do in my life that are not acceptable tokens, and hopefully we can make this show be one of the acceptable tokens, though. Then the show mantra: where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty, and the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. You know, that's taken from places all over. It's taken from Article 7. It's taken from places throughout Scripture. So it's just something that is, when it comes to doing this show, that's what I try to keep in mind as I do this. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 17 is a place you could say that it's taken through Scripture. So look forward to having my next guest join us. And I want to say thank you to Joel Skousen. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you being here.
Well, it's good to be with you. And regularly, I guess we're on once a month now.
We're doing once a month, yes, sir. And I'm truly grateful for it. The second Tuesday, and I owe you an apology. I didn't reach out to you yesterday. I reached out to him about an hour and a half before showtime, and he was very generous with his time. And he's just like, "Hey, give me a 1-day notice." And I'm like, "Sorry, Joel. I will really work on at least giving you a 1-day notice. I might even try to do a little bit more than that, and the 1-day notice." All right. There's a number of things that I wanted to bring on Joel to talk about. And, well, let's do this. Let's back up. Let me reintroduce Joel Skousen. Most people who are watching this know who Joel Skousen is, but Joel Skousen is a political commentator, former president for the Constitution Party. He has been a political commentator for years, former F4 Phantom pilot. I almost said F-18, and that's not true. But F4 Phantom pilot back in Vietnam, flew off carriers. Bottom line is, and also a pilot. And I'm one of the news stories. Had a news story come across my desk, and Joel Skousen's name was in it as a pilot, and he was able to put his plane down when the plane had I believe it was a malfunction with the fuel system. But I mean, not shabby piloting, Joel. So good to know that you still have the good old solid hand when it comes to the stick. So, but there's a number of topics that I want to cover. Oh, also, he is the editor and founder of the World Affairs Brief. You can go to the worldaffairsbrief.com and visit him there, folks. In fact, I just barely re-upped my last week. I re-upped my subscription to the World Affairs Brief for $88. I get 2 years. I say, what a deal. So, some of the best money spent. Joel, thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you. Let's begin by talking about the big gorilla in the room, which is Trump's disastrous, in my opinion, foreign policy vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine. Trump has done some wonderful things about stopping the woke agenda domestically. But except for his tariffs, which are bad economic policy and are just screwing up the economy royally, and especially about prices. I'm about to do a major remodeling, and we're going to face 25% increase in wood prices because most of them are imported from Canada. That won't cause overall inflation. That's more a function of the Federal Reserve increasing the money supply, which Trump doesn't have a clue about stopping in order to halt inflation. But on foreign policy, frankly, Trump is just as naive as can be about our greatest existential enemies, Russia, China, and North Korea. And it's showing in his contentious attack on Zelensky. And everyone is, in the Trump team, is saying it was Zelensky attacking Trump. It wasn't at all. He remained calm and just stated forthright the principles that he needed to have a viable ceasefire with Russia, that is, security guarantees. Because as he pointed out in that contested meeting, that, there's been 25 times that Putin has agreed to various different types of ceasefires and broken every one of them. And so he seems to be unwilling to get along without guarantees. And of course, Donald Trump says security guarantees are not on the table. And he makes many major mistakes about understanding foreign policy when he talks about his opposition to security guarantees. Number one, thinking that they're going to start World War III. Well, the only way that they could start World War III is if Putin violated them. But Trump says, I trust Putin. I don't need security guarantees. And so my response is, if you trust Putin, then why not put the security guarantees? Because they'll never be used if you trust him. It's only if you don't trust him that you'll be worried about it starting World War III. And in fact, that could only start if Putin not only broke the thing, but if U.S. tried to stop him or start to rearm Ukraine, then if he made good on one of his dozen threats to use nuclear weapons, then he would be starting World War III, not Ukraine. So you see, Trump doesn't think very logically. One of the problems with Donald Trump is when he's on a roll, he thinks he can do no wrong, and he just blusters his way through certain decisions. And he's clearly on a roll. In his joint talk to a joint session of Congress, it was the most braggadocious thing I've ever seen. Now, he had a lot to brag about, but you don't brag about it in the way that you do so that you offend everyone or you appear to be a megalomaniac. Every president, of course, pats themselves on the back for what they did in their State of the Union. This was not a State of the Union address. But in any case, the principle that we need to understand about Trump cutting as a result of that meeting, which he basically told Zelensky to leave. Let me just back up a little bit about the beginning of the meeting.
Can I touch base real quickly on security guarantees?
Okay.
Because some on so one of the things that the InfoWars and some of Donald Trump's biggest supporters are saying about the security guarantees is, hey, Donald Trump, what he was trying to do is get security guarantees in there by going after the minerals, going after the rare earth minerals. It would put the United States there. And so therefore, because United States is going to be there, their people are going to be there, that starts the beginning of security guarantees.
Not at all.
What are your thoughts what are your statements of that?
Absolutely wrong.
How so?
Stupid thinking. Because whenever there are American forces even in there, Russia just attacks around them. They won't bloody American troops. They don't want to give the U.S. an excuse. They would not attack. And in the second place, there's no reason to have American workers in there digging and doing Ukraine has a lot of industrial capacity in terms of mining. And, if Trump thinks that he's going to, put in American companies in there, it still doesn't make any difference because the Russians wouldn't attack them, wouldn't give them an excuse. They'll attack Kiev, they'll attack Ukraine, they'll attack like they continue to do so. In fact, Trump has been royally embarrassed by the fact that Putin didn't even take the hint. And look, Trump gave me everything I want. As a show of good faith, I ought to cool it in terms of attacking Ukraine to make Trump feel justified in his confidence. But did Putin do that? No, he increased his attacks on Ukraine in terms of the missile attacks, including a hotel on the day after that dust up in the White House about humanitarian workers from the United States and Britain. Didn't kill anybody, but it hit this hotel on the top of it with a missile. The point is, that's not security guarantees. Security guarantees are an or else. You abide by this agreement, or else we come in and support Ukraine. Now, it doesn't have to be an Article 5 NATO type of thing saying that it's a war on the United States if you violate this. But, you go back to major military aid to Ukraine, including long-range missiles that will attack Moscow. That's going to be the or else. You have to have something big to block someone like Putin. He has attacked the Caucasus, Georgia, Ukraine, ever since this, supposed phony fall of the Soviet Union. And of course, that's the major thing that every conservative in this nation is ignorant of, is that Russia did not, or the Soviet Union did not fall. In fact, it simply went underground. They took communism underground. And in fact, Putin even admitted this to Tucker Carlson and went right over his head. Because he didn't remember what the standard narrative was. Putin told Tucker Carlson, Tucker, the Russian leadership essentially initiated the fall of the Soviet Union. And Tucker didn't even react. Oh, yeah? Well, isn't that the official story? No, it isn't. The official story is that it was a spontaneous rebellion of people in Europe that the Soviets couldn't control, and so they decided that they would let it go forward and take down the wall, etc. But Erich Honecker on his deathbed said that Moscow gave me orders to stand down the Stasi and let the student protest in Leipzig University go forward. That's what started the whole thing. And then we're to believe that, in the phony attempted coup of Gorbachev in his undefended villa, that the KGB failed. And then the heads of the KGB and the Defense Department and the GRU all fled for their lives. Well, who were they fleeing from? I was the only journalist in the whole United States that asked, who were they fleeing from?
And who were they fleeing from, Joel?
They weren't fleeing from anybody. It was a ruse. It was a fake coup. They simply, disappeared, went to their villas or wherever they are, and the media said, oh, they fled for their lives. It's like the 2014 coup in Ukraine that everybody says was a Western coup, overthrowing a legitimately elected government it wasn't legitimately elected. They've had falsified elections ever since the phony fall of the Soviet Union. The communists were never purged out of Ukraine or Poland or Romania or Bulgaria or Hungary. And that's why all those countries that have joined NATO have dozens of spies working for Putin in NATO. So Putin doesn't fear his nations coming into NATO. In fact, he already has NATO on his border with the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. So all of these excuses are bogus, including the claim that the Western leaders guaranteed that they would not expand NATO 1 inch further to the east.
Okay, so
in fact, that has been proven false.
Here's my question.
It was never a signed agreement. It was a verbal thing. We don't intend to do this and that. But those things have no legally binding in things. But it proves, of course, that the globalists themselves knew that they'd faked their own demise. That's why when he offered to join NATO, Clinton advisors told Clinton, don't let him do it, because they knew that they were still communist.
Okay, so Joel, forgive me. My understanding of history may be off on that. But wasn't the agreement made with the Soviet Union, not with Russia?
No, it was made with Gorbachev on behalf, I guess, of the Soviet, but he was still the head of the Politburo of Russia as well. It doesn't make any difference. There was never any formal agreement.
Okay.
Never any formal agreement. Now, in fact, it's against NATO policy, because NATO policy is that you have to request membership. And and in fact, NATO abided by Putin's objection to Georgia that requested to join NATO, and NATO, out of deference to Putin, said, no, we're not going to let you join NATO. And Putin invaded Georgia anyway. Now think about that. He invaded it anyway. So it shows that it wasn't it was just an excuse,
Right. So there's much in the many people in the conservative movement are anything that the globalists are against, we're for, right? And our globalists here in the United States are the worst of the globalists, because we've got they're letting in transgenderism, they're letting in gays in the military, they're doing all those things are being done here in the United States, and there are some that are holding up Putin a little bit as the gold standard. Hey, this leader is saying, no, we're not going to we're not going to have a bunch of transgenders in the military. We're letting boys be boys and men, quote unquote, men be men. That is one of the reasons why they want to stand for, and they want to look down upon the United States and kind of lift up Putin. I'm like, which is worse? And nevertheless, they're both evil.
Well, there's no doubt, and I've been an anti-globalist, since the beginning. I'm
Right.
one of the pioneers in that movement. So don't go calling me a globalist because I am against Russia. But you are correct.
Please do not take that I was calling you.
No. But the conservatives have done that.
Okay.
I've been given speeches where somebody rose up out of the audience and says, you're a globalist, because I was attacking Russia as a bad guy. Well, you see,
where were you 5 years ago listening to Joel?
Yeah. But the point is, and he got rousted out because of interrupting me in the speech, but he didn't stick around for me to explain why. And this is very important for conservatives to understand. Now, it's true that in the phony war on terror based upon the deep state attack on the World Trade Center, they did that so that they could intervene in innocent countries like Iraq and Afghanistan, who had nothing to do with 9/11. Neither did Osama bin Laden, who worked for the CIA. They had lookalikes, claim that they were responsible for 9/11. In fact, that's who they killed, one of his lookalikes in Abbottabad, Pakistan, that Obama took credit for killing Osama bin Laden. But the point that I want to make is that in this, the conservatives got this attitude then that anybody that the globalists are against, like Iraq, must be innocent.
Right.
And besides, we've had 2 or 3 decades where people hate everything that the mainstream media says as a lie, whether it's about COVID, whether it's about the vaccines, whether it's about the phony war on terror and all of those types of transgender. Everything the media said for years now has been false. And suddenly they're attacking Russia. And Joel Skousen says they're right. And I'll tell you why they're right. Because if you know your history of conspiracy, you will know that they have always built up the enemies before a war. They built up Hitler before war. But before that war started, they switched sides and started to attack Hitler, so that they were on the right side of the war during World War II. But they were they were giving all kinds of excuses. They were downplaying the threat of Hitler, especially in Britain prior to the war, until it got very imminent, and then they all came out in unison against Hitler. Same thing here. They did it a little early because Donald Trump got elected, which was not expected. He was not supposed to be elected instead of Hillary Clinton. And so they pulled the Russia card out to talk about Russia interference and bringing Trump to power. So they started a little earlier before the war, but now they are in earnest in that same direction, attacking Russia. And it's correct. They are correct. The media is correct. Not because they're good, not because they believe in truth, but because they are playing the globalist agenda. You build an enemy and then you switch narratives right before the war so that you're attacking the enemy that you built. And why did they build up Russia? Or how did they build up Russia? Well, I can name dozens of things. They made Russia a nuclear power. They gave them the plans to the nuclear weapons that they couldn't steal in the Manhattan Project. They gave them the first shipment of enriched uranium because even though they had the plans, they didn't know how to enrich uranium. We gave it to them. And then Russia gave the technology to China. And so that made China a nuclear power. We brought Mao Zedong to power. George Catlett Marshall, overseer, a globalist over Eisenhower during World War II. He was the one who cut off military aid to Chiang Kai-shek because he wouldn't join in a coalition government with the communists, which is suicide anyway. And so, I mean, we even gave, during the Nixon administration with Henry Kissinger, a supreme globalist, as his national security advisor, we gave them from the Bryant Company the miniature ball bearing technology so they could move their missiles. This is crucial information. That's building an enemy. We have allowed for years China to spy on our military industrial complex. When I was in Washington in the 1980s, I had a subscriber call me and say, I work for Hughes Aircraft, military contractor, and we've got Chinese in here looking over our shoulder. We finally went on strike over that. And instead of stopping the Chinese, they locked us out of the factory on Saturdays and let the Chinese have the run of the factory.
Oh, wow.
Now, you see, that's building an enemy. And our Commerce Department, even during the Reagan administration, allowed a lot of sensitive technology to go to China. And then it was Henry Kissinger who brought the Chinese into the World Trade Organization and most favored nation status. Where at the Paris peace talks? What did that have to do? There was an enemy funding the North Vietnamese, and we rewarded China with a seat in the Security Council, kicking out Taiwan and giving them most favored trading status to Red China. Now that's globalism, and they're building an enemy, but before this war, they start to attack. And they're starting to get a little bit, antagonism against China, but there's not much they can do because 80% of our imports come from China. And so it would really be a disaster for our consumer economy, especially if we cut off. We never should have allowed China to have this kind of trade status so that they could lure countries or companies away from the United States. But I forgot to finish what I was saying, not only about the phony fall of the Soviet Union, but what Tucker Carlson what Putin said to Tucker Carlson. He said, during the Soviet years, Lenin and Stalin even put the Donbass and Crimea into the borders of Ukraine. And Putin said, I don't know why. Of course he knows why, because it's been a long, Lenin faked not a fall of communism, but friendship with the West for a period of time to get aid and trade. And they knew they were going to do it again. Anatoly Golitsyn, the famous defector from the Soviet Union, told the CIA many years before that they were going to fake their own demise again, and New Lies Told and the Perestroika Deception. Very, very good books on that.
I want to throw in one other. Didn't Khrushchev tell someone, I want to say, was it Ezra Taft Benson? But I want to say Khrushchev said, you're going to sell us the rope that we're going to hang you with.
Yeah, and there's been several communist leaders that have said that. But you see, it isn't, as the John Birch Society used to believe, that the globalists control the communists in the Soviet Union, and so it's kind of a mutual relationship. No. It's a one-way street. It's the globalists assisting the communists, but the communists still think the globalists are just stupid for helping us. It's not a two-way street at all. But in any case, what he also, talked about in his interview with Tucker Carlson, which, Tucker's very ignorant of conspiracy theory or fact. He talked about the fact that Ukraine is we're like one country. We're like in a brotherhood. We've always been, part of the same country. And that's just not true at all. In the 1930s, Stalin starved the Ukrainians almost to death and killed millions of people. And they hate the Russians and they hate them even more now because of the war in the invasion. But you see, in the 2014 coup, where the duly elected president, Viktor Yanukovych, was overthrown, he wasn't overthrown. In fact, he engineered the coup, even though the Western leaders under Victoria Nuland and the globalists gave support to the coup and funded a lot of the protest and made sure that they had food and things. They could not have succeeded at all had not Yanukovych or his communist leader of the Rada, which is the parliament in Ukraine, given the order for the Berkut, the riot police that had the protesters surrounded in the Maidan Square so they couldn't leave. They gave him a stand-down order, just like Moscow did to Erich Honecker to let the Stasi go forward, and just like they did to the KGB when Yeltsin was speaking on that tank about liberty in Russia, etc., and it was broadcast on television, which was still controlled by the Communist Party, and they didn't shut it down. Why not? Because it was a phony coup. And on even the protest, I saw a documentary by the Russian students years after, and they said, the only thing we couldn't understand when we were in Red Square, where was the KGB? They were always after. They were always shadowing us, and they were nowhere to be seen, and they didn't threaten us at all. Somebody gave a stand-down order. That's a phony coup. Well, you see, on Friday in February of 2014, the only reason the student protesters won, quote, won, is that someone gave an order to the Berkut to stand down, and they were nowhere to be seen. The protesters just walked out of the square on that Friday morning, and they walked through the presidential palace, and there were no guards on the presidential palace. That's like the January 6th protesters going up to the Capitol, and there's no Capitol Police. Who could have given a stand-down order to the Capitol Police? And then the Democratic-controlled Congress ousts Joe Biden or Barack Obama. How believable would that be if it's controlled by the Democrats? No, it was a phony coup in order to get conservatives to think that this was unjust and that Putin was justified in coming in and attacking Ukraine. Even if there was injustice, how is that justification for coming in, invading a country and killing and taking advantage of everything and killing all these civilians? What's the greater injustice? Even if there were, but I'm saying there wasn't injustice. This was a communist faked coup. And how did it work? Because you see, in order for Putin to do the initial invasion in 2014, which happened after this coup, he had to have an excuse to come in and do his stealth invasion of Crimea and then the Donbass. So the Russian people speaking people in the Donbass and Crimea had to be antagonized. They had to be persecuted so that Putin could come into the rescue. And that's the role that Yanukovych, as a communist, as a pro-Putin communist, could not do. He could not provoke them. So he had to fake his own coup to set the stage for Petro Poroshenko to get elected, who was a false nationalist, just like Yulia Tymoshenko before them and various other presidents. In the phony fall, you've got a lot of phony nationalists who are actually secret communists becoming presidents, fooling the people, thinking that I'm for Ukraine, we're going to speak Ukraine, and we're not for Russia, but they're lying. And that's the way Petro Poroshenko was. And he got elected with the campaign that I'm going to allow semi-autonomous for the Donbass. We'll have peace with Crimea and Donbass. They have no need to rebel. And as soon as he got elected, he reneged on that. No, you got to speak Ukrainian. You can't speak Russian. You can't be autonomous. And he sent the Ukrainian forces in there to enforce that. And of course, that antagonized them. And sure enough, that's when Putin did his stealth invasion. Could Viktor Yanukovych have done that? Not at all. They would have said, what's a Russian pro-communist doing antagonizing us? But a fake nationalist could do it. Now, that's how sophisticated these conspiracies are, people. You've got to start thinking other than black and white. The globalists play both sides. The communists play both sides. And right now, Putin is playing up the Christian element, which is false. They don't make colonels in the KGB out of Christians. And besides,
you don't think he had a come to Jesus moment, do you?
Of course not. The point is, the Orthodox Catholic Church in Russia has always been under domination by the Communist Party. That's why they never protested anything that happened in the Soviet Union. Not a single protest out of the Orthodox Church, because they are all led by communists in there. And so is the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And that's why it got banned, because they were undermining the war effort. So it isn't what it seems, you know. And of course, real Christians, of course, don't kill innocent civilians in a war. And he's directly targeting them. They don't take 20,000 Christian or Ukrainian children into Russia and won't let them back and change their name to Russian names, etc. They don't do that. And real Christians don't ban other Christian sects like Jehovah's Witnesses and restrict the Mormons and other people in Ukraine, as Putin has done. So conservatives have to wake up and understand their conspiracy history to understand that. Now, I'm not saying in this Zelensky, who has a checkered background morally, is necessarily a righteous leader. I don't think he is. But one thing he really is trying to defend his country. And it showed in that interview. If you watch that interview, it was 49 minutes long, but only the last 9 minutes were antagonistic.
Right.
And, you know, Vance started it.
So
let me finish. Vance started this antagonism. He talked about diplomacy, and he was anything but diplomatic. He attacked him. He said, and Zelensky, and I have the whole recording, and Zelensky had expressed thanks to the United States before he did. And Vance started to attack him. You haven't been thankful. You haven't said thank you. And he said, thank you and thank you. And again, and then later on in the attack, he said, you're not thankful. Of course, in Vance's and Trump's point of view, you're not thankful unless you agree with us, which had nothing to do with that. You can be thankful and disagree with this turn of events because, you know, Zelensky knows that Russia is out to take Ukraine. In fact, Zelensky even said, you know, and this is what blew Trump up. He said, you're going to feel it someday too, you know, in terms of, you can't tell us what to feel. And he was speaking predictably, not dictating. And Trump says, you're dictating to us what we know. I'm telling you, you will feel this because Trump will attack. You've got an ocean between us, but that won't stop Trump from attacking someday with nuclear weapons. So it all went down.
Trump or Putin from attacking with nuclear weapons?
Putin from attacking. But you see, both Trump and Vance knew in advance what his position was. They apparently did not have an agreement beforehand, schooling him in the fact that we will discuss our controversial issues in private session. This was in public. But, you know, Trump himself is to blame. Trump knew that this wasn't the place to bring up the things. Vance knew that it wasn't. But Trump couldn't contain himself. He's the one who started pontificating about if I were president, this war never would have started. And he made all kinds of braggadocious statements. Zelensky had to correct him that even during the Trump administration, he did not stop Putin, made no effort to stop Putin. And Trump took great umbrage at that, even though Zelensky didn't say that in an attacking mode at all. And then Vance started as, you have all the gall to come in and try to litigate your position here. But you see, Trump started it. If Trump didn't want it litigated, he shouldn't have started pontificating and making statements and then turned to Zelensky and says, would you like to respond? That's an open invitation to respond. What's he supposed to do? Say, oh, thank you very much for.
That was what Trump was hoping he was going to do.
Yeah, but Trump's a fool. He just made a major mistake. But Zelensky was right. There wasn't a single thing that he said that was wrong, including the attack by Vance that you met with the Democrats and you started to campaign for them. No, he didn't. He simply asked for more aid when he was there talking to the Democrats, and the Democrats were in favor of aiding Ukraine. So that was a natural thing to do. That wasn't a campaign endorsement of the Democrats at all. So you see, Vance and Trump got angry at Zelensky for telling the truth in front of the media, which they didn't want to. But, if they didn't want to err in that way, they should have been smart enough. Of course, you can't control Trump. Trump is a loose cannon. He'll say what he wants to say. And he's repetitive. He keeps saying, really good show, and really good person. And it's just very, very disturbing to listen to this man, except when he is telling the truth. He does a great job when he is but he's a populist. He was never a conservative before he came to the White House, and that's why he got snookered the first time by allowing Reince Priebus to fill his 4,000 seats in the West Wing of the White House with Rhino Republicans and deep state people. And this time, he thinks he's going after the deep state, but he doesn't understand that the deep state is not the entrenched bureaucracy that Doge is going after. There are people that are sympathetic to the things of the deep state in the entrenched bureaucracy because they're leftist, and the deep state is leftist. All right. So they're already, the bureaucracy of the government is filled with leftists. They hardly ever hire conservatives in those regimes. But the real deep state of the dirty tricks people, the assassination squads, the people that went after Kennedy, that hired the mafia hitman to snipe from the grassy knoll, the FBI agents who were in communication with Mr. Crouch, who shot at Trump. His cell phone was tracked to FBI headquarters, not headquarters, but one of their regional offices in Washington, D.C. twice before he attacked Trump.
And other communications from that building and around that area to his cell phone as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's right. And then the second assassin, of course, there's been no investigation. Here's a guy that doesn't make any more than $3,000 a month, and he pays a first-class ticket coming, picks up a stolen car and a weapon that has been the serial. That's a conspiracy. That means there's other people providing these things to them. You don't just walk off the plane and pick up, a false car and a weapon and go camp out and wait for the president unless you've been schooled. But these are patsies, of course. These are not real trained assassins. So, in any case, if it happens a third time, and it may well be, in order to stop the good things that Trump are doing, they won't miss the next time. It'll be a professional hit.
Okay, I want to come back to you. You'd mentioned tariffs. One of the things that you also disagreed with Donald Trump is his use of tariffs. Sorry. What would be a proper way to use tariffs? Because we do have a lot of countries that have bigger tariffs on the United States than vice versa. So what are your thoughts there? What's the proper way to use tariffs, or should we just get rid of them altogether?
Yeah, I really, there's only one real good economic reason for tariffs, and that is when a product or company is being heavily subsidized by a government so that they're able to compete unfairly with American products, then that's an appropriate place for putting a tariff to eliminate that advantage from the government subsidy of those things. So all communists, like China, you have most of those companies are subsidized. But the other principle is that you never allow trade with an existential enemy, because trade always benefits their nation economy and gives them foreign currency to use. And so we never should have let, China open the doors for trade with China. China never would have been this enemy to the United States had we not had most favored trading status and World Trade Organization membership for China. And by the way, that's the first thing that Newt Gingrich did it wasn't part of the contract with America, and this may be beyond or before your time, but I remember Newt Gingrich well promising this great conservative agenda. If you make me Speaker of the House and we win this election, and the first thing he did was give most favored trading status to Red China, and that wasn't on the agenda at all, and that was telling. That guy's a wolf in sheep's clothing, a very slick talker, but he betrayed the conservatives big time in those. And of course, Henry Kissinger, you expect that. He's a known globalist. And he joined the Communist Party when he was a soldier in West Germany. Went over to East Germany, and not because he's a communist.
Really, I was not aware of that.
Oh, you weren't? Well, no. It's just like Alger Hiss went and joined the Communist Party, and Whittaker Chambers testified. That's what got him convicted of perjury, because Whittaker Chambers testified that he was a member of the Communist Party, but he wasn't a communist. He was a globalist. He joins the communists because he was going to play the role at the side of Roosevelt during the Tehran Agreement, the Yalta Agreement, all that. He was the one putting the communist, propaganda to Roosevelt to get him to give away Eastern Europe after that, and all of those terrible things. Operation Keel Hall agreed with Stalin to send all the Europeans back, even Europeans that had never been in the Soviet Union. But he joined the Communist Party, both of those, as globalists, joined it so that the communists wouldn't think anything about why they were serving their needs. He's one of us, secretly. So you see, that was a ruse that they did. So you see, the globalists play both sides, the communists play both sides. You have to really know your stuff to be able to analyze what's going on. And anybody who tells you this is a national interest of Russia or national interest of Iran or nothing happens with national interests. All nations are driven by conspiratorial agendas that are hidden, and that's what you have to understand. You can never analyze history unless you understand the history of conspiracy. You got to go back a long way to know how we built Russia. The Western sources funded the Bolshevik Revolution, both in New York and in London. $20 million in gold came out, or actually it was $20 million in rubles that the British gave to the Bolsheviks to fund the revolution. And there were good people in the Wilson White House that funded the American expedition into northern Russia to help the White Russians contest that, until the globalists found out, and then they cut off military aid to the White Russians, and that's why they lost. We cut off all military aid, and that's the modus operandi of all the globalists. Red China, Russia cut off the military aid to the opposition. The Hungarian Revolution, don't give them any aid, let them. And, Vietnam, my period during Vietnam, we were fighting with one hand tied behind our back. We weren't allowed to mine the Haiphong harbor, so that Russian and Chinese ships bringing in military supplies every day practically could do so freely. Weren't allowed to attack those ships.
And also all the action plans that were submitted days in advance so they could be given to the communists.
Well, that especially happened during Korea because a Russian general was in charge of military operations of the United Nations. So all the United Nations plans from the U.S. military had to be approved first by a Russian general. And of course, that got leaked, of course, to the communists, except for the Incheon landing. MacArthur kept that a secret even from the UN. That's the only reason why it succeeded. And what did they do? As soon as he had cut off the North Vietnam at that 58th parallel or 52nd, I forgot which it is, they call a ceasefire that preserves the communist North from being annihilated, and they would have been annihilated, you see. And so most ceasefires, all ceasefires literally that are involving the communists are to their advantage. And that's what Zelensky fears in this, that a ceasefire that delivers everything that Russia has taken by aggression, delivers to them, is wrong. He's not being required to give up anything. And so it's a very sad situation.
I'd like to touch Syria with what's happening in Syria. How much did the United States have to do with this, cause the problems that are happening right now? How much of it is on Israel, and how much of it is just upon just the nature of that region? And do you think the Soviets and the Chinese are causing problems there too?
No, the Russians have been kicked out of Syria. The big thing that your audience needs to know is that ISIS is a deep state operation from beginning to end. They took about 50% of the jihadists that they had imported from Libya and Tunisia into Syria to create a civil war against Bashar al-Assad. And that didn't work out because, you see, they were using the excuse that Assad had chemical weapons to justify this attack on Assad. And he gave them up. He said, I don't want them. Take them away. Let's dismantle these. And that just destroyed the globalist agenda in Syria. And so in order to continue the war, they had to create ISIS, which was to be a more virulent form of jihadism. And that's why you had all the orange jumpsuits and the beheadings, and these horrible things to just shock the world that this is a new type, but it was a creation from the deep state from beginning to end. And the leaders essentially were trained in Israel. They have Arabs living in Israel, and they're able to get some of the best and the brightest and train them to infiltrate. They've infiltrated Iran and Iraq and all of the various Arab countries, right almost to the highest levels. And they're very, very expert at that. They're very expert at training these leaders. So the jihadists don't know that ISIS is a deep state operation. It's only the leaders that know. And that's why, they were rescued in the Battle of Mosul. The Iraqis, Parliament showed video of U.S. helicopters coming in and rescuing ISIS leaders as Mosul was falling to the Iraqi militia, who were the only ones fighting against ISIS. And by the way, the Iraqi militia was funded not by the U.S., but by General Soleimani of Iran. And that's why the deep state intelligence told Trump a lie, that Soleimani was the greatest sponsor of terrorism in the world. He was not the greatest sponsor. The U.S. is the greatest sponsor of terror in the world. Soleimani was the greatest sponsor of anti-U.S. terror in Iraq. He was the one funding the Iraqi militia and giving them the intelligence to go after them. That's why he had to be killed. And Trump is ignorant of that to this day. So these things are just not as you assume. But ISIS, you see, and Trump says, we defeated ISIS. No, we didn't defeat ISIS. The last battle of ISIS was in Raqqa, Syria. And ISIS was holed up in Raqqa and controlled it. And suddenly the U.S. engineered a ceasefire. And they paid 50 semi-trucks driven by Arab drivers to go in the part of the ceasefire, take out ISIS fighters, their families, and their heavy weapons. That means they got to keep what ceasefire do you extract the enemy out of there? They normally require to leave their heavy weapons behind. No, they got to take them. They went back into Syria. And those same ISIS never did disappear. They simply split into a couple of groups. And there was this major group from Giuliani, which is now the ruler over there, that Turkey took over the funding and the control of that ISIS partnership. And they came in and threw Assad. He was Alawite, and the Alawites are a minority within Syria. And now the Alawites are in full battle against the ISIS, and ISIS is killing a lot of them. It's a purge of the Alawites who supported Assad. But it's interesting, and this shows the relationship in Syria between Turkey and Israel. The U.S. still occupies the oil producing region of Syria, and they don't allow Syria to have any of that oil to rebuild. And they market that oil. And they don't have a pipeline. They use trucks, and you see those trucks by satellite intelligence lined up at the Turkish border. Even during the time when ISIS was presumed to be the U.S. enemy, the U.S. was allowing ISIS oil. Before they occupied the ISIS oil fields, ISIS was lining up at the Turkish border to sell their oil, driven into Turkey and then marketed to Israel. And Israel would also do medical services for all the ISIS fighters, especially at least the leaders, that were wounded in battle were taken to Israeli hospitals. So see, Israel was reaping the oil revenue from Turkish sales of ISIS oil. And that's still happening under the U.S. occupation of Syria. They're still marketing the oil through Turkey. And so it's little wonder that Turkey was sponsoring this camp of ISIS, which is now in charge. And they're now in a bloodbath against the Alawites in Syria. And Trump had the audacity to say, take credit. We destroyed ISIS. No, it was never destroyed. He's never been told that the deep state is the one that created ISIS.
So what should we do in Syria? What should the United States do in Syria now?
Well, Syria, by the way, Israel was knew about this happening. The U.S., I don't know if they actually gave the orders or anything, because this is real deep underground secret stuff. This is real deep state stuff. Most people in the military don't even know that the U.S. military has a section that runs terrorism organization. Most military people, even that work in Afghanistan, are trying to do the right thing, although they are misled in thinking that we're defending American freedom. Nothing to do with American freedom. These are globalist agendas that attack these countries, either for oil or to even to deteriorate the image of the U.S. as the ugly American. And certainly now we're getting that, which I want to cover before we end, about the cutoff of military aid to Ukraine and what that means for NATO. But
I'm making a note of that right now.
Okay. But the ISIS is still very much alive, and it's still funding by black market weapons coming through Turkey now, and there's other things that come through normal black market weapons channels. But Israel was the big winner in overthrowing Assad. Israel then invaded Syria itself and took it back. And it's also stopped Iran from being to funnel arms and ammunition to Hezbollah, which was another enemy of Israel, of course. And so it has completely changed the perplexion of the Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah attack there. Now, Hezbollah is not a good organization. Iran is not a good organization. I'm not defending them. Israel is.
I'm not sure if that's going down.
That
or
Israel.
Joel,
Israel.
either I'm going in and out. Either I'm going in or out, or you're going in and out. You started talking about Israel.
Yeah. I pulled out 80% of the Gaza brigade to allow this attack by Hamas to happen. That's what conservatives need to know. So Israel is just as responsible for this as Hamas.
All right, folks, I'm trying to see.
Two actions failing.
Yeah, on your side. So I'm trying to look at. Let's
I think
pause
it's on my side.
Okay.
But in any case, I just wanted to say that the damage that Trump is doing by cutting off aid to Ukraine is the fact that NATO is putting up $800 billion. The weapons Ukraine needs can be provided by NATO.
Okay, I am. Let's see if we have. I do think the connection issue is on Joel's end. So, what I may have him do when he comes back is jump off and then hop back on, and we'll see if we can finish this. Because I hate to lose Joel, but also we wanted to talk about Ukraine aid, but there were a couple other topics that I wanted to hit as well. So I am. I think he might completely be down. Let's see what's happening. Folks, I'm just doing a little checking on my end. Okay, I'm going to call Joel and just ask him if he wants to try and reconnect. If you'll bear with me a minute, folks. I'll try and do that. Today I don't have a producer. We just have myself and my guest. Oh, looks like he's back. All right. I'm hanging up. I see you. I see you there. So you were talking about the $800 billion.
Yeah, but even with that money, that NATO cannot provide about half of the weapons that Ukraine is using. HIMARS is strictly a U.S. production. So are Patriot missiles. So are many of the other things related to the tanks and aircraft, F-16s, that are. And remember, most of NATO countries have now been talked into buying the F-35. And that means that Trump, if they don't do what he wants them to do vis-a-vis Ukraine, he can cut off the updates, and those F-35s become relatively worthless. So NATO is very upset now with Donald Trump for threatening, to stop them from helping Ukraine, because they are very concerned, and rightly so. Being globalists, they're very concerned that Russia is an existential threat. The globalists are right in this one thing.
Okay, so I want to hit on F-35s. What are your thoughts on us giving F-35s to a bunch of the nations around the world?
Well, it's really not, they are careful. They're only allied nations that are getting it. Denmark, Norway, Germany, France has their own aircraft. Sweden has their own aircraft, but F-35s are going into Italy and Germany. And so those are the main countries that are getting them. I'm not sure if Poland is either, but remember that aircraft, you can shut those things down within a month by not giving the data updates to them,
Okay.
which they require in order. You see, the F-35 does what no other aircraft can do. It can integrate with dozens of other aircraft and coordinate the attack, just like an AWACS, aircraft almost does. And so, but you have to have the updates on the electronic warfare so that you can jam the other signals, so that you can go in and do what F-18 Growlers do. And, we're very, very good. There's no other nation that does jamming as good as the United States does. And so it really isn't a danger to give F-35s, because if a nation goes rogue, they can be cut off.
Okay, so what about the back engineering of that information? And
No,
it seems like it. Go ahead.
It's updated weekly. You can engineer one version and then it's out of date. It's as soon as the Russians and the Chinese change their ECM and other electronic countermeasures tactics, we change ours. And so it's changing weekly. And those updates are not like a computer where maybe once every 6 months. You need an update every month to keep the F-35 current and able to do its job.
Where does the F-22 fit in?
Well, the F-22 is by far the best fighter in the world, and it's too bad that the U.S. is not. It's the best dogfighter in the world, period. And there's no other aircraft that compete with it. But dogfighting is kind of passé now because of the F-35's capability of shoot from beyond visual range. You don't even get into a dogfight anymore. And that's why they've switched from F-22 and essentially to F-35. The F-35 is a game changer, and despite its teething problems, just like the Ford-class aircraft carriers, these things are way above what anything Russia and China has. They have look-alike aircraft because they've been stealing, some of the design features of that, but they don't have the stealth technology that we have in terms of the coatings and the maintenance that keeps those airplanes, doing what they do. But they don't have the combat tactics or combined arms tactics. That means the ability to coordinate between air power, sea power, armor, and infantry seamlessly with friend to foe identification, so you don't shoot down your own enemies, your own airplanes. Now, we did that. We just lost an F-18 in the Gulf with a friendly fire, where one of our destroyers shot down one of our own aircraft because of misidentification problems. So it can happen, but the Russians are abysmal at it, and that's one of the reasons why they could not invade Ukraine well, because they couldn't combine fighters in the air and armor and their missiles and tell who was friend for foe.
It's one of the things that I love about you, Joel. You can cover everything, including some of the high tech aircraft that I love. I must admit, I love the aircraft. Did you touch everything on Ukraine, cutting off the aid to Ukraine that you want to? And
well, now Trump, Zelensky has agreed to a temporary 30-day ceasefire while they're having talks. The one good thing about the dust up at the White House meeting with Zelensky is that he got himself now into negotiations. Trump was cutting them off completely. He was going to make a deal with Russia regardless and not let Ukraine have any say in it. Now Ukraine is meeting this week in Saudi Arabia with Marco Rubio and Zelensky, and he's going to continue to push for what he wants, but he's agreeing now to a 30-day conditional ceasefire if Russia will go along. And believe me, the communists will regroup and prepare to blast Ukraine again if the ceasefire doesn't work out. So ceasefires only benefit the Russians, especially if the U.S. Now, Trump has said he's going to restart aid to Ukraine. So it shows that he's gotten a lot of pushback from his initial position of blasting Ukraine and denying any security guarantees. So we haven't seen the end of this. It's going to be an amazing analysis. So I hope people will subscribe to my World Affairs Brief so they can keep up on it and what I come up with.
Well, they definitely need to. There is something also that I think I want to ask your thoughts. China seems to be really laying low right now. We're not hearing anything out of China. Concerns me.
Well, the World War III is not going to start over Ukraine because Russia cannot nuke the West because he can't occupy. And if you can't occupy, they come back and get you eventually. Okay. He's got to wait for China. China's just biding its time, building military gear and weapons and getting ready to take on Taiwan. They know that's going to probably trigger World War III. And it will be a 1-2 punch. Taiwan and then North Korea go after South Korea, and we'll be in a hell of a war in the Pacific.
Is there any way to avoid this?
None. All 3 predator centers in the world want it. The globalists want it in order to talk us into a global militarized government. The Russians and Chinese want it to build their own version of the New World Order. And believe me, it'll even be more tyrannical than the globalists. At least the globalists have to play lip service to democracy. The Russians and Chinese don't.
Okay. Do you see a candidate? This is just a crazy off-the-wall question. We've got about 3 minutes left. Really crazy off-the-wall question. Do you see anyone that fits the profile of who you think might be the Antichrist?
No. In fact, I'm not even sure the Antichrist is a single person. We know that the globalist organization is the preferred satanic-based conspiracy that is going to win, okay? And that's good enough for me. What the globalists are doing, Russia and China are just as evil. Remember, all 3 predator centers are run by Satan. They have satanic revelation at some level. And these are not independent. So one's not better than the other, but one is preferred. And the preferred one is the more subtle form of sophistication. But it's my concerted belief that World War III will be nuclear and will be so horrific that we will not recover from this war. That evil will begin to fight against evil, and that will lead to the second coming. And how the globalists play out, the point is, you're never going to see a robotic AI controlled society where you own nothing. That's a pipe dream. This war is going to end those types of sophisticated transhumanist globalism type thing. You're going to have infighting of evil fighting against evil such that the whole world will be in warfare. It'll eventually end up in a battle of Armageddon in Israel, and we'll be cut off from that. But I think we see internecine warfare here in the United States.
Pardon, inner what?
Necine warfare, meaning evil fighting against evil. And Trump is a fool for believing you're going to have a new golden era. How can you have a new golden age when you have corrupt individuals and corruption is growing? Even though you've denied wokeness now and people are backtracking, like Zuckerberg and Target and others are backtracking on wokeness, people have not given up on that. The homosexuality and transgender stuff is still corrupting our youth. It's still growing, and it's still getting worse.
Okay, I just have a comment that I want to mention from the audience. So be prepared. This is coming from the audience. This isn't from me. But Arsenio, want to say thank you. Speaking of the fall of the USSR, I remember that while Yeltsin was yelling in Moscow, Gorbachev was on vacation in Crimea.
That's right. Yeah. And he wasn't arrested by the KGB, free to go and vacation. Remember, Yeltsin was yelling in Moscow, and the KGB were nowhere to be seen, and the communists running the television station were giving him full broadcast rights. It was a phony fall of the Soviet Union. And if any one of your listeners want to, get the data, I published it in the World Affairs Brief in 2023, and I can give them that issue if they email me at editor@worldaffairsbrief.com.
Well, Joel, I want to say thank you so much for joining us again today. I do in the future want to ask you if you have thoughts on Washington's dream at Valley Forge, and if you think there's any actual truth behind that.
Okay, we can talk about that.
All right, Joel, thanks for your time today. Appreciate you being on. Folks, Joel Skousen of the World Affairs Brief. You've got to go there. You've got to get his brief. I just re-upped mine. Joel, thank you so much for joining us today. God bless.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Take care. Thank you. Bye. All right, folks. This has been Talk with John. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. See you next week.